Captain Jinho Park floated in the darkness between stars. His repair ship docked against a massive quantum relay that had gone silent 3 days ago. Through his helmet display, he could see the problem. A microfracture in the relay's core housing had let radiation slowly cook the internal systems. It would take him and his crew 16 hours of careful work to fix it. Nobody would thank them. Nobody ever did. Jinho had been doing this job for 12 years now. He had repaired over 300 relays across this sector of space. Each relay connected dozens of star systems, letting ships travel faster than light. Without these relays, the galaxy would fall apart. Trade would stop. Communications would die. Entire civilizations would be isolated. But when Jinho went to the annual maintenance conferences, the other species barely looked at him. The Valorians, with their proud warrior culture, saw repair work as beneath them. The Tekrel, despite being masters of technology, found physical repairs tedious and assigned the work to others. The Quilax created beautiful art but had no interest in maintaining the infrastructure that distributed it across the stars. Humans did this work. Humans fixed things. Back on the orbital station above New Cerulean, Dr. Heijin Kang stared at her screens with tired eyes. Another food crisis was developing on Valorum Prime. The automated supply systems had broken down again. The algorithms that were supposed to manage food distribution across the planet kept making the same mistakes, sending too much food to wealthy districts and leaving poor areas to starve. Heijin had spent 3 days diving into the problem. She found the issue buried deep in the code. Someone had set the priority weights wrong months ago, and nobody had noticed because humans usually caught these problems before they became disasters. She fixed it in 20 minutes, then spent another 6 hours making sure similar errors didn't exist elsewhere in the system. Her report would go to the Galactic Council's Department of Logistics. They would file it away, without reading it. If anyone asked, they would say the problem had fixed itself. They never mentioned the human who actually did the work. In the Grand Council chambers on the capital world of Axis Prime, Ambassador Donghyun Lee sat through another session. He had been attending these meetings for 8 years. In all that time, he had watched the council make decisions that affected trillions of lives. He had watched them debate philosophy and policy for hours. But whenever he raised his hand to speak, whenever humanity had a proposal or a concern, the response was always the same. Polite smiles, patient nods, and then they would move on to the next topic as if he had never spoken. Today, the council was discussing a territorial dispute between 2 minor species in the outer reaches. The argument had been going on for 3 hours. Both sides were getting angrier. Voices were rising. Donghyun could see the solution clearly. It was a simple compromise that would satisfy both parties. He had seen a dozen disputes like this before. He waited for his turn to speak. When the chairman finally acknowledged him, Donghyun presented his solution. It took him 90 seconds to explain. The Valorian representative waved a dismissive hand. "Thank you, Ambassador Lee. We will take your suggestion under consideration." Then, he immediately turned to another delegate and continued arguing. Donghyun's solution was never mentioned again. 2 weeks later, a human mediator named Sumin Bei would be quietly sent to resolve the dispute. She would use exactly the solution Donghyun had proposed. Both species would agree to it, and the council would congratulate themselves on their wisdom in sending a mediator. Nobody would remember that a human had suggested the answer months before. This was the pattern. This was how things always worked. Humans maintained the quantum relay network that connected the galaxy. Humans debugged the computer systems that ran galactic commerce. Humans mediated the endless, small disputes that would otherwise explode into wars. Humans optimized supply chains, managed emergency responses, and solved the 1,000 daily problems that kept civilization running. They did it well. They did it without complaint. And they were completely invisible. Eunji Nam had been the human liaison director for 5 years. Her job was to coordinate humanity's various roles across galactic civilization and represent their interests to the council. She had started the job full of hope and enthusiasm. She believed in the dream of a united galaxy, where all species worked together. That dream had died slowly over the years. She remembered the exact moment she understood the truth. It was at a diplomatic reception on Axis Prime. The Great Hall was filled with representatives from hundreds of species. Unji was standing near a group of Valorian military officers, trying to join their conversation about recent pirate activity in the outer reaches. She wanted to tell them about the human patrol ships that had been tracking those pirates for months. One of the Valorians was telling a joke. She heard him say, "You know what we call humans? The galaxy's janitors. Useful for cleaning up messes. But you don't invite janitors to dinner parties." The other Valorians laughed. None of them noticed Unji standing 3 meters away. She walked out of the reception that night and went straight to her office. She pulled up the files on human contributions to galactic civilization. The numbers were staggering. Humans made up only 2% of the galactic population. But they handled 30% of infrastructure maintenance, 40% of diplomatic mediation, and over 50% of emergency response coordination. And yet humanity had no vote on the council. No real voice in galactic affairs. No recognition for what they did. 2 months ago, humanity had formally requested full council membership. They had been part of galactic civilization for 200 years. They had completed their probationary period. They had contributed more than most species who held council seats. The response came back last week. Request denied. The council's official statement said that humanity had not demonstrated exceptional qualities worthy of full membership. Their contributions, while appreciated, were merely functional. The galaxy needed species that could provide vision, leadership, and extraordinary capabilities. Humanity was too ordinary. Unji read that statement 3 times. Then, she scheduled an emergency meeting with Chancellor Minho Choi, the leader of Earth's government. The meeting lasted 6 hours. By the end, they had made a decision. If the galaxy saw humans as janitors, then perhaps it was time for the janitors to stop cleaning up everyone else's messes. Perhaps it was time for the galaxy to learn what happened when the invisible people who kept everything running simply walked away. But they would not storm out in anger. They would not make threats or demands. They would simply leave, quietly and professionally, like good workers finishing their shift. The galaxy would barely notice them leaving. That was the point. Chancellor Minho Choi stood before the Galactic Council's broadcast system and delivered the announcement that would change everything. His voice was calm and professional, the tone of a bureaucrat making a routine policy statement. After careful consideration, humanity has decided to restructure its galactic commitments. We will be focusing our resources on internal development and system improvement. We are grateful for the opportunities we have had to serve the galactic community. Thank you. The statement was only 40 seconds long. It contained no emotion, no accusation, no warning. It was so boring that most species barely paid attention. The news feeds mentioned it briefly and moved on to more interesting stories. Behind that bland announcement was a plan that had taken 2 months to organize. Every human in galactic service received secure orders. They would complete their current assignments professionally. They would document everything they were working on. They would leave detailed instructions for whoever replaced them. And then, they would come home. The withdrawal would take 6 months. It had to be done carefully and quietly. Humanity would not give the galaxy any excuse to say they had abandoned their responsibilities. They would leave everything organized and ready for the next person to take over. The problem was that nobody else wanted those jobs. Tae-hyun Song was one of the senior engineers at Meridian Trade Hub, a massive station that processed cargo from 100 different worlds. He maintained the docking systems, the cargo handling equipment, and the environmental controls. The station handled over 10,000 ship movements per day. One malfunction could cause disasters. Tae-hyun had been doing this job for 9 years. He knew every quirk of the ancient systems. He could tell when a docking clamp was about to fail, just by the sound it made. He had prevented dozens of potential catastrophes that nobody else even noticed. When he got his orders to return to Earth, he spent 2 weeks writing the most detailed documentation he had ever created. He included every trick he had learned, every shortcut, every warning sign to watch for. He organized it all into a simple database that anyone could search. Then he went to his supervisor, a techrel named Corvix, and told him he was leaving. Corvix barely looked up from his console. "Fine. Send your documentation to the replacement team." "What replacement team?" Taehyun asked. "I will assign someone," Corvix said, waving a hand dismissively. Taehyun left his office clean and organized. His tools were neatly stored. His workspace was spotless. 3 weeks after he departed, nobody had been assigned to replace him. The docking systems started having minor problems. Corvix figured they would fix themselves. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out thousands of times. Sumin Bey had spent 15 years as a diplomatic mediator in the outer reaches. She had personally negotiated 17 peace treaties and prevented countless small conflicts from escalating into wars. She understood the complex web of alliances, grudges, and cultural sensitivities that defined this volatile region of space. Her calendar was full of ongoing negotiations. She had 3 active disputes she was managing, plus a dozen situations she was monitoring. When she received her orders to withdraw, she carefully briefed her assistant, a young Quilax diplomat named Thilix. "These are the critical situations," she explained, showing him her files. "The Havrite and Melkon situation is stable, but fragile. You need to check in with both sides at least twice a week. The outer colony disputes need constant attention. Never take sides. Always find the middle ground." Thilix seemed confident. "I understand. This does not look complicated." Sumin wanted to explain that it was much more complicated than it looked. That successful mediation required reading subtle emotional cues, understanding unspoken cultural expectations, and having endless patience. But Thilix was already looking at his own console, clearly ready for her to leave. She packed her belongings and booked passage back to Earth. 2 months after she left, the Havrite and Melkon dispute exploded into violence. Thilix had missed the warning signs that Sumin would have caught immediately. Captain Jinho Park brought his repair fleet back to Sol system in a convoy of 12 ships. His crews had mixed feelings about leaving. Many of them loved the work they did. They took pride in keeping the galaxy connected. But they were also tired of being invisible and unappreciated. "Do you think they will notice we are gone?" asked his first officer, a young woman named Heyoon. Jinho looked out at the stars. "Eventually, but not right away. They will think the problems are just random failures. They will not connect them to our absence until much later." Dr. Heejin Kang was one of the last humans to leave her position. She worked in the Central Logistics Coordination Center on Axis Prime, the heart of the galaxy's supply network. Her job involved monitoring thousands of automated systems and fixing problems before they caused disruptions. She had trained 2 replacements over her final month, both technical programmers who were confident in their abilities. They watched her work for a few weeks and decided they understood everything. "The algorithms handle most of it," one of them said. "We just need to monitor the outputs." Heijin tried to explain that the algorithms were flawed and required constant human oversight. That half of her job was catching problems that the automated systems missed. But the Techrel were certain their programming was superior to human intuition. She left them her contact codes in case they needed help. They never called. 3 months later, famines started breaking out across multiple worlds as the supply systems began making critical errors. The exodus continued through the autumn and winter. Human mediators left their posts. Human engineers returned their equipment. Human administrators closed out their files. Human emergency responders came home. They did it so professionally, so quietly, that most species barely noticed. When someone asked where the human workers had gone, the typical response was a shrug. "They went home. We will manage without them." Ambassador Dong-Yun Lee was among the final humans to leave Axis Prime. He walked through the council chambers one last time. He had sat through hundreds of sessions in this room, watching the powerful species make decisions that shaped the galaxy. He wondered how long it would take them to realize what they had lost. On Earth, in the Sol system, humanity began to settle into a new rhythm. The returning workers needed new assignments. Some joined efforts to improve Earth's infrastructure. Others worked on colonies in the outer solar system. Many simply rested, recovering from years of thankless work. Chancellor Minho Choi held a private meeting with his advisors. "How long do you think we have before they contact us?" Yuna Huang, who had replaced Unji Nam as liaison director, pulled up her projections. "The small problems will start immediately. Relay failures, system glitches, minor diplomatic incidents, but they will not see the pattern for at least 6 months. They will think they are just having bad luck. And when they do see the pattern, then they will have to decide if they actually value us, or if they just need us." Yuna looked at the data streaming in from across the galaxy. Problems were already starting. "Either way, we will know the truth." Humanity waited in silence while the galaxy slowly began to fall apart. The first relay failure happened in the Tertius sector on a Tuesday morning. The quantum relay that connected 6 major trade routes simply went dark. Ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and found themselves stranded in normal space, days away from their destinations. Station Commander Velix, a Valorian, immediately sent a priority repair request. He expected a human repair team to arrive within hours, as they always did. That was how things worked. Relays failed sometimes, and humans fixed them, but no repair team came. After 12 hours, Velix sent another request, this time marked as urgent. Still, no response. He tried contacting the human repair fleet directly. Their communication codes were no longer active. Finally, he assigned his own engineering team to attempt the repair. They stared at the massive relay structure and realized they had no idea how to fix it. The relay's systems were thousands of years old, a combination of technologies from a dozen extinct civilizations. Humans had maintained them for 2 centuries and had developed an almost intuitive understanding of how they worked. The Valorian engineers had no such understanding. The relay stayed dark for a week. Then 2 weeks. Trade routes shifted away from the Tertius sector. Millions of credits were lost daily. Ships took longer routes. Supply chains began to strain. Finally, a Techrel engineering team managed to get the relay working again, but it took them 19 days. A human crew would have fixed it in 16 hours. Nobody connected the slow repair to humanity's absence. They assumed it was just bad luck, a complicated failure. On the border between Melkon and Havrite territory, tensions were rising again. The 2 species had been arguing over mining rights in a disputed system for decades. For the past 10 years, human mediators had kept the situation calm through patient negotiation and careful relationship building. But Sumin Bey was gone now. The Quilax diplomat who replaced her, Thilix, approached the situation with confidence. He called a meeting between both sides and proposed what he thought was a fair compromise. The Melkon representative stared at him with barely concealed anger. "This is insulting. You clearly favor the Havrites." 1. The Havrite representative was equally offended. "Favor us? This proposal gives them everything they want." Thilix tried to calm both sides, but he did not understand the deeper cultural issues at play. The Melkon valued direct confrontation and saw his diplomatic language as weak and dishonest. The Havrites valued harmony and saw his quick timeline as disrespectful and rushed. Within a week, the 2 sides stopped talking entirely. Within a month, the first shots were fired. The Havrites retaliated by attacking a Melkon colony outpost. The border dispute that Sumin Bey had kept peaceful for 15 years exploded into a shooting war. Thousands died in the first month of fighting. On Valorum Prime, people were starting to starve in the southern districts. The automated supply systems that distributed food across the planet were malfunctioning. Too much food was going to the wealthy northern cities while poor southern regions received almost nothing. The Techrel programmers who had replaced Dr. Heejin Kang stared at their screens in confusion. According to the algorithms, everything should be working perfectly. The food production numbers were good. The transportation network was functional. But somehow, people were not getting fed. They ran diagnostics on the automated systems. Everything checked out. The algorithms were running exactly as programmed. What they did not understand was that Heijin had been manually overriding the algorithms every day, catching errors and fixing distribution problems before they became critical. The algorithms had always been flawed, but she had spent years learning how to compensate for their weaknesses. Without her constant supervision, the flaws were producing disasters. The famine on Valorum Prime grew worse. Emergency food shipments were sent, but the same broken algorithms misrouted them. Warehouses in the north overflowed, while southern cities ran out of supplies. Riots broke out. The planetary government declared a state of emergency. At Meridian Trade Hub, Corvix was having a terrible month. The docking systems had been having constant problems since Taehyun Song left. Minor glitches at first, easily fixed by running system resets, but the problems were getting worse. Yesterday, a docking clamp had failed completely, nearly causing a cargo ship to crash into the station. 3 people were injured. Corvix had to shut down the entire docking system for emergency maintenance. His engineering team was struggling. They could fix the immediate problems, but they did not understand why the failures kept happening. Taehyun's documentation was thorough, but documentation could not replace years of experience and intuitive understanding. Corvix finally accessed Taehyun's personnel file and tried to contact him. He got an automated response that the contact codes were no longer active. Taehyun was back on Earth and apparently not taking calls from former employers. High Magistrate Calix of the Valorian Council had been noticing a pattern. As the head of the Infrastructure Committee, he received reports from across the galaxy about system failures, diplomatic incidents, and logistical problems. Individually, each incident seemed like bad luck or poor management. But when he compiled them all together, the pattern was impossible to miss. Relay failures were up by 340%. Diplomatic incidents had increased by 520%. Supply chain disruptions were affecting 60 different star systems. Emergency response times had tripled across the board. Calix pulled up historical data and found something interesting. These problems had all been rare or non-existent for the past 200 years. The galaxy had experienced an unprecedented period of stability and smooth operation. Then, 6 months ago, something changed. The problems started increasing dramatically. Calix started investigating what had changed 6 months ago. It took him 3 days to find the connection. Humanity had withdrawn from galactic service 6 months ago. He pulled up records of human job assignments and compared them to the locations and types of failures the galaxy was experiencing. The correlation was perfect. Every area where humans had worked was now experiencing serious problems. Calix called an emergency session of the Galactic Council. He presented his findings to the assembled representatives. The chamber fell silent as they looked at the data. "Where are the humans?" Calix demanded. "Where are the workers who were handling all of these issues?" The council secretary checked the records. Humanity withdrew from galactic service 6 months ago. They returned to their home system. "Why?" asked a Quilax representative. "They said they were restructuring their commitments to focus on internal development," the secretary replied. The council members looked at each other with growing concern. Someone finally said what everyone was thinking. "We need them back." The chairman of the council authorized an immediate communication to Sol System. It was a formal request for humanity to resume their previous positions and responsibilities. The message was polite but urgent. Chancellor Yuna Huang received the message on Earth and read it carefully. It was not an apology. It was not an offer of better treatment. It was simply a request for humanity to come back and fix the galaxy's problems. She drafted a response that was equally polite and brief. Humanity is currently focusing on internal development. We are confident that the galaxy's exceptional species can manage these routine issues. The response quoted the Council's own words from their rejection of humanity's membership request. The council sent another message, this time offering various incentives: better pay, improved working conditions, bonuses for rapid deployment. Yuna's response was just as brief: "Thank you for your generous offer. We will take it under consideration." She had no intention of accepting. Not yet. The galaxy needed to understand what it had lost, and it needed to understand the difference between needing humans and actually valuing them. The problems continued to multiply, while humanity watched from the Sol system and waited. 18 months after humanity's withdrawal, the galaxy was drowning in cascading failures. The Melkon and HFY War had expanded to involve 6 neighboring species. What started as a border dispute had become a regional conflict consuming entire sectors. Over 40,000 beings had died. Millions were displaced. The Council had sent 3 different mediation teams. But none of them could achieve what Sumin Bei used to accomplish. With a few weeks of patient conversation, the war was not the worst problem. The relay network was collapsing. 137 major relays had failed in the past year. Some had been repaired, slowly and badly. Others remained dark, creating gaps in the faster-than-light travel network. Ships had to take longer routes, adding weeks to journeys that used to take days. Trade was suffering. Goods arrived late, or not at all. Planets that depended on imported food were experiencing shortages. Manufacturing centers could not get raw materials on schedule. The economy was contracting for the first time in 3,000 years. But still, the galaxy tried to adapt without admitting they needed humanity. The Techrol built automated repair drones to fix the relays. The drones were sophisticated pieces of technology, equipped with advanced sensors and repair tools. They should have worked perfectly. They failed 90% of the time. The relays were too old, too complex, too quirky. They required judgment and intuition that no algorithm could replicate. The drones would attempt a repair and make things worse. Techrel engineers would then have to fix both the original problem and the damage the drones caused. Admiral Sunho Kang watched the galactic news feeds from his office on Earth's orbital station. He had commanded one of humanity's deep space repair fleets for 20 years. He knew exactly why the automated drones were failing. "They are treating the relays like machines," he said to his second officer, Minji. "But the relays are more like living things. You need to understand them, feel them, know their moods." Minji nodded. "Do you think the Council will ever admit they need us?" "They already know they need us," Sunho replied. "The question is whether they will ever value us." On Axis Prime, the heart of galactic government, things were falling apart in ways both large and small. The Council chamber itself was in disrepair. Climate control systems were malfunctioning, making the chamber uncomfortably hot during sessions. The holographic display systems flickered and failed randomly. The automated translation systems had started producing embarrassing errors, turning diplomatic speeches into accidental insults. Nobody had realized that humans maintained all of these systems. They were invisible problems that never happened, so nobody thought about them. Now they happened constantly, and nobody knew how to fix them properly. Council sessions were becoming chaotic for other reasons too. Without human mediators managing the smaller disputes, conflicts that should have been resolved quietly were now being brought before the full council. Every session dealt with a dozen trivial arguments that wasted hours of time. The council members were exhausted. They had always prided themselves on their ability to govern the galaxy wisely. Now they were spending more time dealing with maintenance problems and petty disputes than actual governance. Archon Tellium of the Quillax was one of the few council members who had always respected humanity. He had worked closely with human diplomats for decades and had tried to support their request for council membership. The other members had outvoted him. Now, watching the council struggle with problems that humans used to solve invisibly, he felt a deep sense of shame. During a brief recess, he approached High Magistrate Calix. "We made a terrible mistake." Calix nodded grimly. "I know. Pride is destroying us," Tellium said. "We did not lose workers when humanity left. We lost the species that held civilization together." The breaking point came when the core relays began failing. The core relays were the ancient heart of the faster-than-light network. Massive structures, built by civilizations that had vanished millions of years ago. They were the most important and most temperamental pieces of technology in the galaxy. Every other relay connected back to them. If they failed, the entire network would collapse. Humans had maintained the core relays for 2 centuries. They had developed techniques passed down through generations of engineers. They knew which systems could be pushed hard and which needed gentle handling. They understood the strange harmonics that indicated problems before they became critical. When the first core relay started showing warning signs, the TechRel engineering team assigned to it missed all the subtle indicators. By the time they noticed something was wrong, 3 major systems had already failed. They attempted an emergency repair. It made things worse. The relay went completely dark, taking down connections to 20 star systems. Panic spread through the council. If the core relays failed completely, the galaxy would fragment into isolated sectors. Civilization would collapse. The council held an emergency session that lasted 18 hours. They debated what to do, but the answer was obvious to everyone in the room, even if none of them wanted to say it out loud. Finally, Tellium stood up and spoke the truth. We need humanity. Not because they are convenient. Not because we can pay them. We need them because they are the only ones who can fix this. They are the only ones who understand the systems we have been taking for granted for 2 centuries. The silence that followed was profound. The chairman of the council, an ancient being named Sorval, finally spoke. Then we must do more than ask them to return. We must apologize. We must acknowledge what we have done. Will they accept our apology? Asked a Valorian representative. We treated them as servants for 200 years. We denied them the respect they deserved. Why should they forgive us? And then? One probably. Calix pulled up records showing all the messages the council had sent to humanity over the past year. Requests, offers, incentives, all business transactions. Never once had they sent an actual apology. We have been negotiating as if this is a labor dispute, Calix said. But this is not about money or working conditions. This is about dignity, about recognition, about being valued as equals. The council authorized a formal delegation to travel to Sol system. Not to hire workers or negotiate contracts, but to apologize, to acknowledge their failure, to ask, humbly, if humanity might consider helping the galaxy again. 7 council members made the journey to Earth. They traveled in a simple ship, not the grand diplomatic vessels they usually used. They came as supplicants, not as rulers. Chancellor Yuna Huang received them in a conference room on Luna Station. It was a modest room, nothing like the grand chambers on Axis Prime. The council members sat on simple chairs and faced a woman who looked tired but determined. They offered their apologies. They offered honors and recognition. They offered humanity a full council seat with equal voting rights. They offered reparations for 2 centuries of disrespect. Yuna listened to it all in silence. When they finished, she leaned back in her chair and said, "You are not here because you value us. You are here because you need us. Do you understand the difference?" Grass. The council members looked at each other uncomfortably. Nobody had an answer. When we asked for council membership, Yuna continued, we were not asking for special treatment. We were asking to be recognized as equals, to be part of the community we had served for 200 years. You said we were merely functional, that we had not demonstrated exceptional qualities. She pulled up displays showing the galaxy's current state. The war, the failed relays, the supply chain disasters, the collapsing infrastructure. This is what exceptional looks like, Yuna said quietly. 200 years of invisible work that kept your civilization running, and you never noticed until it stopped. One of the council members, a young Valorian named Kestra, spoke up. You are right. We were blind. We saw you every day, but never truly saw you. How do we make this right? Yuna looked at each of them carefully. I will bring your offer to our people. But understand this. If humanity returns, it will not be as servants. It will be as partners, as equals. That means real change, not just words. The council delegation returned to Axis Prime with uncertainty. They had made their apology, but they did not know if it would be enough. On Earth, humanity debated what to do next. Some wanted to refuse entirely, to let the galaxy learn its lesson more thoroughly. Others felt compassion for the billions of innocent beings suffering from problems they did not create. The question was not whether humanity could help. The question was whether the galaxy was truly ready to change. The debate on Earth lasted 3 weeks. Every major city held public forums where citizens could voice their opinions. The discussions were broadcast across the entire Sol system, reaching colonies on Mars, the moons of Jupiter, and the orbital habitats scattered throughout humanity's home. Some speakers were angry and wanted nothing more to do with the galaxy. They used us for 200 years, said one former relay engineer. They treated us like tools. Why should we help them now? Said one. They treated us like tools. When this Manway, others spoke with sadness about the suffering happening across the galaxy. There are billions of innocent people dying from wars and famines, said a former mediator. They did not create these problems. Their leaders failed them, just like those leaders failed us. Many spoke about dignity and respect. If we refuse to help entirely, we become as cruel as they were. Dismissive, said a planetary governor. But if we return as workers without true change, we betray ourselves. There must be a middle path. President Nari Kim listened to every voice. She was a small woman with steel in her eyes, someone who had risen from being a relay technician to leading Earth's government. She understood both the technical and human sides of this crisis. After the 3 weeks of debate, she made her decision. She would address the Galactic Council directly, not as a petitioner but as the leader of an equal civilization. The council chambers on Axis Prime had never been so full. Representatives from every member species attended. The session was broadcast across the entire galaxy. Trillions of beings watched as President Nari Kim's holographic image appeared before the council. She did not smile. She did not bow. She stood straight and spoke in a clear, firm voice. The galaxy is broken. You know this. You have lived it for 18 months. You have seen what happens when the invisible work stops being done. You have felt the consequences of taking dedicated workers for granted. She paused, letting the words sink in. Humanity does not want revenge. We do not want to rule over others. We never wanted power. We wanted only to be seen, to be valued, to be treated as partners rather than servants. Nari pulled up displays showing the current state of galactic infrastructure. The broken relays, the ongoing wars, the supply chain failures. It was a catalog of cascading disasters. These problems can be fixed. Humanity has the knowledge and skill to repair what has been broken. But we will not return as we were before. If we come back on new terms. She laid out humanity's conditions, 5 simple requirements that would reshape galactic civilization. First, respect. Every species' contributions will be acknowledged and valued, regardless of how simple or complex the work appears. The beings who maintain your infrastructure, mediate your disputes, and solve your daily problems will be honored, not ignored. Second, recognition. Humanity will have a full council seat with equal voting rights. We will have a voice in the decisions that shape this civilization. Third, restructuring. The council will establish a Department of Essential Services, properly funded and given the same importance as military and economic departments. The beings who keep civilization running will have the support they need. Fourth, education. All council species will learn about and participate in the work that sustains your society. Future generations will understand that every role matters, that no work is beneath notice. Fifth, reciprocity. Humanity will help rebuild, but we will not work alone. Other species will work alongside us, learning these skills, sharing the responsibility. This will be a true community effort, not a service contract. Nari looked directly at the council members. We do not want to rule you. We want to work with you. But we will not be invisible anymore. We will not be taken for granted. We will be partners, or we will remain in Sol System and build our own future. The council chambers erupted in discussion. Some members objected immediately. A Valorian military commander stood up. These terms are too demanding. You are taking advantage of the crisis. Nari's expression did not change. We are asking for what should have been given freely 200 years ago. Basic respect. Recognition of our worth. A seat at the table we helped build. Telium of the Quilax stood and spoke in support. Humanity is not taking advantage. They are offering us a second chance that we do not deserve. I support their terms completely. Calyx of the Valorians also stood, surprising many in the chamber. I fought in 30 battles before becoming a magistrate. I thought I understood strength and valor, but I was wrong. These humans showed more strength in walking away quietly than we showed in centuries of military might. I support their terms. Might climb. Well, fine. One by one, other council members stood to voice support. Some did so enthusiastically, ashamed of how humanity had been treated. Others did so reluctantly, recognizing they had no choice. The galaxy was collapsing without humanity's help. After 6 hours of debate, the council voted. The terms were accepted unanimously. President Nari Kim nodded. Humanity will send representatives to begin planning the reconstruction. This will take time. The problems accumulated over 18 months will not be fixed overnight, but we will fix them. Together, the galaxy exhaled in relief. Help was coming, but Nari's final words were a warning. Remember this moment. Remember what it feels like when essential work stops being done. Remember what happens when you take dedicated people for granted. We walked away once in silence. If you fail to honor these terms, if you slip back into old habits, we will walk away again. And next time, we will not return. The reconstruction began slowly. Engineer Hyunwoo Nam was among the first humans to return to active service. He led a training mission to Meridian Trade Hub, where the docking systems were still having constant problems. Korvix, the TechRel supervisor, met him with a mix of relief and embarrassment. I should have appreciated Taehyun when he was here. I should have listened when he tried to explain things. Hyunwoo nodded. You will listen now. And you will learn. Because next time, you will need to fix these problems yourselves. He brought with him a team that included not just human engineers, but also 3 TechRel, 2 Valorians, and a Quilax. They would all work together, learning from each other. The work was slow at first. The non-human engineers struggled with concepts that seemed intuitive to the humans. Why did you need to listen to the sounds a docking clamp made? Why did preventive maintenance schedules need to be flexible rather than rigid? Why did you need to understand the history of a system to fix it properly? Gradually, they began to understand. The machines were not just collections of parts. They were systems with personalities, quirks, and histories. Fixing them required more than technical knowledge. It required patience, attention, and a kind of empathy. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Human mediators returned to conflict zones, but they brought teams of diplomats from other species. They taught them the subtle art of listening, of finding common ground, of building trust slowly and carefully. Human logistics experts tackled the supply chain disasters, but they worked alongside TechRel programmers and Quilax administrators. They showed them how algorithms needed human oversight, how systems required constant adjustment, how no amount of automation could replace thoughtful judgment. The core relays were the biggest challenge. Captain Jinho Park came out of retirement to lead the repair mission. He brought his most experienced crews, but he also brought apprentices from a dozen different species. They worked on the relays for 6 months, making repairs while teaching others the ancient knowledge humanity had accumulated. It was exhausting work, physically and emotionally draining, but it was also rewarding in ways the apprentices had never experienced. A young Valorian engineer named Kestra worked directly with Jinho for 3 months. She had joined the mission thinking engineering was beneath a warrior's dignity. She left understanding that maintaining civilization required a different kind of courage than fighting battles. "My people celebrate warriors who die in glorious combat," she told Jinho on the last day of repairs. "But nobody celebrates the engineers who spend their lives keeping the lights on." That was wrong. "You are warriors too, fighting a different kind of battle." Jinho smiled. "We are not warriors. We are just people doing necessary work. But thank you for understanding its value." The war between the Melkon and Havrites ended when Suman Bey returned with a mediation team. It took her 4 months of patient negotiation, but she helped both sides find a peace that honored their needs and dignity. More importantly, she trained 5 new mediators in the process, ensuring the peace would last even after she left. Slowly, month by month, the galaxy began to heal. On Earth, President Nari Kim watched the progress reports with cautious optimism. The terms were being honored. The Council had established the Department of Essential Services and given it real authority. Human representatives sat on the Council with full voting rights. Other species were learning the skills humanity had developed over 2 centuries. But she remained vigilant. The galaxy had changed under pressure of crisis. The real test would come later, when things returned to normal, when the immediate emergency was over. Would the changes last? Would the respect endure? Admiral Sungho Kang visited her office one evening with similar concerns. "Do you think they have really learned? Or will they forget once the crisis passes?" Nari looked out at Earth, beautiful and blue against the darkness of space. "Some will forget. Some will slip back into old habits. That is human nature, and probably universal nature, but others will remember. And those who remember will teach the next generation." She turned to face him. "We cannot control what they do. We can only control how we respond. We walked away once to teach them a lesson. If necessary, we will walk away again. But I hope we will not have to." 5 years after humanity's return, the galaxy held a ceremony at the rebuilt council chambers. It was a celebration of recovery, marking the end of the crisis period and the beginning of a new era. Representatives from every species attended. They honored the workers who had rebuilt the infrastructure, mediated the conflicts, and restored the systems that kept civilization functioning. For the first time in galactic history, these workers stood on the main stage, receiving recognition equal to military heroes and scientific pioneers. President Nari Kim gave the closing speech. She spoke about the journey humanity had taken, from invisible servants to respected partners. She spoke about the lesson the galaxy had learned at great cost. "We are all essential," she said. "The warrior who defends borders and the engineer who maintains relays. The artist who creates beauty and the mediator who builds peace. The scientist who discovers knowledge and the logistics officer who distributes supplies. Every role matters. Every contribution has value." She looked around at the assembled representatives. "You learned this lesson in pain and chaos. You learned it by losing what you had taken for granted. I hope you never forget it, because the day you forget is the day we will walk away again." The galaxy remembered. Not perfectly. Not universally. There were still those who looked down on essential work, who failed to appreciate the invisible labor that sustained their comfortable lives. But enough remembered. Enough changed. The culture shifted slowly, generation by generation. toward a civilization that valued all contributions rather than just the flashy ones. And in Sol System, humanity remained watchful. They had rejoined galactic civilization, but on their own terms. They were partners now, respected and valued. They would never be invisible again. The galaxy had finally learned what it meant when dedicated people walked away in silence, and they had learned what it cost to get them back.